They called her overcautious. Not to her face, never directly, but in the way supervisors sighed when her name came up, in the way pilots rolled their eyes when her voice came over the radio asking one more question. In the way emails about operational efficiency always seemed to follow her shifts. Aisha Coleman sat at her console in the airline's operations center, headset on, posture straight, eyes moving between weather maps, flight paths, and system alerts that most people trusted too easily. She was black, 37, and one of the most experienced dispatchers in the room. She was also the quietest. Around her, the control floor buzzed with energy, white supervisors pacing behind rows of desks, junior dispatchers joking nervously, large screens flashing green on time indicators that made executives feel safe. Aisha didn't trust green lights, she trusted inconsistencies. At 9:42 p.m, she noticed the first one. Flight 728, Denver to Seattle, Boeing 737, full passenger load. Everything on the main dashboard looked fine, fuel within margins, weather listed as manageable. Crew checked in and cleared, but Aisha's screen showed something else. A subtle mismatch between forecast layers, upper-level wind shear interacting with a fast-moving cold front that hadn't fully populated across the system yet, not enough to trigger an automatic warning, enough to make a route unpredictable at cruising altitude. She zoomed in, cross-checked with a secondary meteorological feed she kept open on her own initiative. One management said was redundant. The turbulence bands were tightening. Aisha keyed her mic. Flight 728, dispatch, she said calmly, confirming you're planning to maintain current route after waypoint Sierra 4? A brief pause. Then the pilot's voice, white, confident, slightly amused. Affirmative, dispatch, we're well within parameters. Aisha swallowed. Recommend minor reroute south by 12 miles, she said. Developing instability ahead. Silence. Then a chuckle. With respect, the pilot replied, we're not seeing that up here. We'll stick with the filed plan. Around Aisha, a few heads turned. A supervisor glanced over, eyebrow raised. Aisha didn't react. She pulled historical data, similar conditions, similar altitudes. She noticed something most people missed. The instability wasn't where the models expected it to be. It was lower, sharper, more violent. The kind that didn't just shake planes, the kind that broke them. She flagged the flight internally. The system asked for justification. Aisha typed carefully. Emerging wind shear inconsistency. Recommend deviation. Her supervisor leaned over her shoulder. Aisha, he said quietly. The captain declined. We can't hold every flight because of a hunch. It's not a hunch, she replied. It's a gap, he sighed. We're already delayed system-wide. That word again. Efficiency. Aisha looked back at the screen. The aircraft icon crept closer to the unstable zone. She had one option left. She picked up the phone, not the radio, the direct line. Her call would be logged, reviewed, questioned, and if she was wrong, she'd be written up. Maybe worse. But if she was right, Aisha dialed anyway, because being overlooked had taught her something critical. When no one expects you to be right, you learn to be precise. And in the next few minutes, a single calm call from a dispatcher everyone underestimated was going to decide whether 186 people arrived safely or became a headline no one could undo. The airline didn't know it yet, but they were seconds away from finding out exactly why ignoring her had always been a mistake. The line clicked. Captain Harris, Aisha said, voice steady, bypassing protocol the way you only did when you were certain. This is Coleman at dispatch. I need you to listen carefully. The cockpit was quieter now. No laughter this time. We're showing a compression of wind vectors between flight levels 340 and 360, she continued. Not on your primary feed yet. It's forming faster than models predicted. If you stay on course, you'll hit it in 7 minutes. There was a pause, longer than before. That system should be higher, the captain said finally. Our radar's clean. I know, Aisha replied. That's the problem. She pulled up another screen. Historical incident overlays. Same region, same season, same pressure patterns. The notes were grim. Sudden severe turbulence, loss of control, structural stress exceedance. I'm requesting immediate deviations south, she said. Now, not in 2 minutes. Her supervisor stepped closer. Aisha? She raised a hand without turning around. On the other end, the first officer spoke, quieter. Captain, I'm seeing fluctuations on the vertical speed. Another pause. Dispatch, the captain said slowly. If we divert, we're burning extra fuel and risking arrival slots. Aisha didn't hesitate. You won't need the slot if you lose control at altitude. Silence filled the line. Then, say again your confidence level. Aisha looked at the tightening bands on her screen. The gap was closing. High, she said, and rising. The supervisor leaned in again, voice sharp now. Coleman, if you're wrong. If I'm wrong, Aisha said, still watching the aircraft icon, I'll take the right up. She heard the click of a switch in the cockpit. Flight 728 altering course, the captain announced, turning south 12 miles, climbing delayed. Aisha exhaled slowly, but didn't relax, because this was the dangerous part. The plane adjusted its heading just as the system updated across the main board. What had been green flickered to yellow, then red. A wall of alerts bloomed across the operations center. Severe turbulence advisory, unforecast wind shear, immediate hazard zone. Gasps rippled across the floor. Someone cursed under their breath. The supervisor froze, staring at the screen as the danger zone swallowed the original route, right where Flight 728 would have been. In the cockpit, the first officer spoke again. Jesus, look at that! Moments later, another aircraft, one that hadn't diverted in time, reported violent turbulence. Passengers injured. Emergency descent initiated. Aisha's hands stayed still. Flight 728 passed south of the zone, the icon gliding through clear air. Dispatch, the captain said quietly, no trace of amusement left. We're clear. That was worse than expected. Aisha nodded to herself. I know. The supervisor straightened slowly. The room had gone silent. Screens that had once made everyone feel safe now told a different story, one they had almost trusted too much. Aisha logged the call. Every second, every decision, because she knew what came next. They would say she got lucky. They would say the system caught it anyway. They would say procedures worked as designed. They always did. But 186 people would land safely in Seattle that night, and none of them would ever know how close they'd come. Except one dispatcher, overlooked, questioned, nearly silenced, who had made the call no one else wanted to make. And the airline was about to learn that ignoring her had nearly cost them everything. The landing was smooth. Too smooth for what almost happened. Passengers applauded politely, unaware that the air beneath their wings had turned violent just minutes after they passed through. Flight 728 taxied to the gate like any other late-night arrival, engines winding down, lights dimming. To the people on board, it was just another flight. To the operations center, it was a reckoning. As soon as the aircraft icon parked, the floor erupted, not in celebration, but in overlapping conversations, raised voices, and nervous recalculations. White supervisors clustered around the main screens, replaying the weather progression frame by frame. How did we miss that? The system didn't flag it. That wasn't supposed to form there. Aisha removed her headset and set it down carefully. She knew what was coming. The supervisor who'd warned her earlier motioned her into a glass-walled office. 2 other managers were already inside, both white, both senior, both wearing the strained expressions of people deciding which version of the story would survive. Aisha, one of them began, you understand that bypassing standard escalation protocols is serious. Aisha sat straight. So is losing an aircraft. The man frowned. No one's disputing the outcome, but procedure exists for a reason. Aisha nodded. Procedure assumes the models are right. Silence. The supervisor cleared his throat. You put the company at risk by making that call. Aisha met his eyes. I reduced risk. One of the managers leaned back. Another dispatcher could have done the same. Aisha didn't raise her voice. They didn't. That landed harder than any argument. They pulled up the logs, timestamps, internal notes. The exact second Aisha flagged the inconsistency, 9 minutes before the automated system reacted. 9 minutes that meant the difference between turbulence and catastrophe. An executive entered the room without knocking. He was white, older, confident in the way people are when consequences usually stop below their level. Is this the dispatcher? He asked. Yes, the supervisor replied. She deviated a flight without clearance. The executive studied Aisha. Why? Aisha didn't hesitate. Because the system was late. He raised an eyebrow. Our systems are industry-leading. They're still predictive, she said. Reality doesn't wait. Another pause. The executive looked back at the screen behind the glass, where a replay showed the red turbulence mass consuming the original flight path. And if you'd been wrong? He asked. Aisha answered calmly. I would have accepted the discipline. That answer shifted the room, because risk wasn't what scared them. Ownership was. The executive nodded once. The FAA will want a report. I've already started it, Aisha said. That surprised them. Of course she had. Over the next 24 hours, the story grew legs. An internal safety bulletin went out. Pilots discussed the turbulence on private channels. A union representative requested clarification on dispatch authority in rapidly evolving weather conditions. And quietly, very quietly, Aisha's call was circulated as a case study, not publicly, not with her name attached, just as an example of proactive judgment. The airline tried to frame it as a systems win, but the pilots knew. Captain Harris sent a message directly to her console before his next flight. You saved us up there. Thank you for pushing. Aisha read it once and archived it. She didn't need praise, she needed change. Because she had seen this pattern before, a near miss reframed as success, a human decision absorbed into a process that would soon forget why it mattered. She wasn't going to let that happen. They had overlooked the dispatcher because they believed safety lived in automation and authority lived in the cockpit, because the calmest voice in the room was easy to ignore. But now there was a paper trail. And when regulators started asking why one dispatcher saw what no system caught in time, the airline would have to answer a question it had avoided for years. What else were they missing? Because they weren't listening to her. The hearing room was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. No phones, no side conversations, just rows of officials, binders open, faces set to neutral. The FAA panel sat at the front, white shirts, dark jackets, eyes trained not on emotion but on evidence. Screens behind them displayed timelines, weather models, and one critical marker highlighted in yellow. 9:44 p.m. Dispatcher override initiated. Aisha sat at the table alone, no supervisor beside her, no executive buffering her answers, just her notes, neatly organized, exactly the way she'd always worked. Ms. Coleman, the lead investigator began, walk us through why you escalated when protocol did not require it. Aisha didn't defend herself. She explained. She pointed out the lag between model updates and atmospheric behavior. She showed how the secondary feed, one management had called redundant, had flagged instability earlier. She overlaid the projected flight path with the turbulence cell as it actually formed, not as it was predicted to. This, she said, tapping the screen, is where the system thought the danger would be. She tapped again. And this is where it was. A quiet murmur passed through the room. So you made a judgment call, the investigator said. Yes, Aisha replied. That's my job. The airline's representative shifted in his seat. But you bypassed clearance, he said carefully. Aisha looked at him. Clearance would have taken 4 minutes, she said. The aircraft had 3. That ended the debate. The final report was released 2 weeks later. It didn't use dramatic language, it didn't assign blame publicly, but it said something far more powerful. The incident was prevented due to early human intervention beyond automated alert thresholds. Human intervention. Those words changed everything. The airline quietly updated its dispatch authority policy. Dispatchers were granted expanded discretion during rapidly evolving weather events. Secondary feeds were no longer labelled redundant. Training materials were rewritten to include a new case study. Aisha's call. Her name was mentioned once, in an appendix. That was enough. Inside the operations center, the culture shifted slowly but unmistakably. Pilots paused before dismissing concerns. Supervisors listened longer. Green lights were questioned instead of trusted blindly. One evening, a junior dispatcher leaned over to Aisha's desk. "Hey," he said quietly, "can you take a look at this with me? Something feels off." Aisha smiled faintly and put her headset back on. "Of course," she said. Months later, during a safety symposium, an executive spoke about the importance of empowering frontline decision-makers. "We learned," he said, "that disasters aren't always prevented by louder alarms, but by people willing to act before they go off." Aisha watched from the back of the room. She didn't clap. She didn't need to. Because 186 people had landed safely that night. Because a system had bent just enough to let judgment through. Because the quiet dispatcher everyone had overlooked had made the call that mattered most. The airline hadn't celebrated her. They hadn't needed to. They had changed. And in aviation, that is the highest form of acknowledgement there is. Because safety isn't about being right on paper. It's about listening to the person who sees the storm forming, before anyone else is ready to believe it.